Guest appearances have been a part of the Scooby-Doo franchise for decades, going so far as to be the premise of 2 separate series as well as any number of direct-to-video releases. At first, the guest stars varied from celebrities whose popularity was waning and who may have simply needed the paycheck, to other Hanna-Barbera properties being used for cross-promotional purposes. But later, as Scooby-Doo became a legitimate cultural phenomena, those with notoriety who grew up watching the gang were eager to make appearances on the show, and doing so was no longer considered a source of professional shame. Now we're even to the point where the studio is releasing theatrical films filled with nothing but big names, even if they have to shit all over the talented people who've been voicing the characters for decades. With these negative feelings in mind, today I take a look at what I consider some of the worst guest appearances in the Scooby-Doo franchise. By worst, I don't necessarily mean poor performances or that the celebrities are terrible people.
Awful people.
Although that may be the case in 1 or 2 instances. These are the worst for any number of reasons that will be explained and are completely arbitrary and based entirely on my own opinions. Sonny Bono was half of the musical duo Sonny and Cher, the artists behind the single best song to be forced to wake up to for thousands of years stuck in your own personal hell. At the height of their fame, they starred in their own variety show with Sonny playing straight man to the acerbic Cher. Even as their popularity waned, they were still depicted as such in their appearance on the new Scooby-Doo movies. They separated 2 years after that episode aired, and a little over 20 years later, Sonny would be dead from a skiing accident, with even the manner of his death being fodder for tasteless jokes. While Cher has, over the years, both praised and criticized him as a husband, a more problematic aspect of Sonny Bono's life was his membership in the Church of Scientology. He never went on record admitting he was a full-fledged Scientologist and still claimed his religion was Roman Catholic on official forms, but after his death, his widow confirmed he had been a Scientologist when she admitted the cult made it difficult for Sonny to leave their fold. The cult itself, of course, claims there had been no estrangement from the late singer before his death, and if you can't trust the word of a religion created in the 1950s by a pulp science fiction writer who reportedly said that the best way to get rich was starting your own religion, who can you trust? Being a Scientologist itself doesn't necessarily mean you're a bad person, but Sonny Bono never officially rebuked the cult even after the suspicious 1995 death of one of their members in their custody. Nor did he come out against Scientology even after many of their criminal activities were exposed, including framing, or trying to frame, critics of the cult and infiltrating the IRS. Hiding your real identity while simultaneously trying to frame an innocent person to further your criminal activities. Where have I heard that scenario before? Rock musician behavior has often been so notorious that the phrase rock and roll lifestyle is shorthand for sexual and drug-fueled debauchery. Modern performers don't quite have the same reputation as those who came before, though perhaps that's more a result of better PR than actual better behavior. Still, it cannot be denied that many stars from the 1960s and 70s enjoyed a lifestyle that even Charlie Sheen would have found excessive. There are few better examples of this than the frontman for the rock group Kiss, Gene Simmons. Despite one of the original members of the band being allegedly booted for drug and alcohol issues, Simmons himself claims to be anti-drug. However, he remains infamous for his sexual appetite for fans and groupies. By his own admission, he's estimated having had around 5,000 sexual partners, many of which he claims to have photographic evidence via Polaroids in front of the hotels where the acts occurred. These dalliances also include, however, unwilling makeup artists, dishwashers, and journalists. allegedly. As in, allegedly, but he still settled claims out of court with his accusers. As some of my other videos would attest, I'm no prude, nor will I shame those with massive libidos with enough fame and fortune to satisfy them. Legally and with consent. I can't be the only one who watched Daphne and Velma cozying up to the band and thinking how the two teams would have been treated in real life. Ricky Gervais is perhaps best known here in the United States for his work on the UK version of the critically acclaimed television show The Office, though he's had plenty of success in film and as a stand-up comedian. He also has a bad habit of using his comedy talents to punch down. Comedy is subjective. What I find funny isn't necessarily what you would find funny. Something most agree on, though, is that good comedy attacks authority. It's often the only equalizer we have in a world where the rich and powerful have almost complete control over us. That we can laugh at them gives us some small measure of comfort as we struggle through our lives, often having to navigate obstacles those above us in society never have to, or worse, put in our way to begin with. Which is why humor at the expense of the weak and powerless really isn't humor. Punching down is simply bullying, and the only people who like bullies are other bullies. Transgender people have it rough. Not only do they have to contend with their own personal issues, having to manage a body that often doesn't match their internal chemistry, they also have to deal with the hurdles society puts in front of them. Discrimination against them is rampant, even in the LGBTQ community itself, and sadly it's not uncommon to see otherwise progressive public figures come out against them. Suicide and homicide rates are very high for trans people, putting them as a whole at the bottom rung of the unofficial caste system in Western society. So pretty much any jokes at their expense will be punching down, regardless of the target. Which brings us back to Ricky Gervais, who has a history of making jokes at the expense of the trans community. While hosting the 2016 Golden Globes, he joked about noted trans woman Caitlyn Jenner's car accident where a woman was killed. While tasteless, especially to the family of the victim, joking about it is fine since Jenner is powerful and didn't really get punished for her actions. In fact, there isn't a day that goes by when she shouldn't have her vehicular manslaughter tossed in her face. Gervais' jokes, however, focused more on Jenner's transition rather than her reckless actions, and further, Gervais dead-named Jenner by referring to her with her pre-transition name of Bruce, a large taboo for the trans community. In a later comedy special where he brought up his Golden Globes appearance, Gervais doubled down by joking,
Because I've always identified as a chimp, right? Well, I am a chimp. If I say I'm a chimp, I am a chimp, you know. Pre-op, but, and don't ever dead name me.
In a 2019 tweet during Halloween, he joked about dressing up as controversial trans activist Jessica Hyaniv, and when confronted afterward, retreated into the usual, "it's just a joke" defense. And that is the annoying thing about Gervais' jokes at the expense of the trans community. He's careful to pick on arguably the worst examples of trans people. Jenner and Hyaniv are demonstrably terrible people,
Awful people.
who just happen to be trans, and Gervais uses their infamy as a Trojan horse to get in some jabs at trans people as a whole. It's really no different than making a racist joke about Kanye West and claiming it's okay because he's a terrible person. If the joke focuses on West's race, it could be used against any black person and thus isn't really a joke about West. That's the same for Gervais' jibes at Jenner and Hyaniv. If anything, the Scooby Gang should be ripping Gervais' mask off in this episode and revealing what's really underneath his costume of a charmingly awkward British comedian. I do not watch professional wrestling. Setting aside how annoying it is that way too many fans still think the obviously fake performances are real, the storylines themselves are often ridiculous and insulting to one's intelligence. However, I made peace with the sport. Years ago, after a friend of mine who watches WWE explained that pro wrestling was simply soap opera for men and boys. Putting it in those terms made me realize that it's just another form of entertainment, and who am I to judge, especially considering my own fondness for harem anime. Having said that, as an entertainment medium, there are undoubtedly some awful people involved.
Awful people.
And few are as awful as Vince McMahon, the head of the WWE. His on-screen persona of a greedy boss treating his employees poorly does a terrific job of hiding his real-life persona of a greedy boss treating his employees poorly. Chief among the horrible things he's done in this position is how he classifies all his wrestlers as independent contractors, the go-to strategy of greedy employers determined never to pay for any employee benefits like health insurance, and considering the high amount of job-related injuries with potentially long-term adverse effects, those guys need coverage. But they won't get it from McMahon, whose net worth is likely well over $2 billion. McMahon was also charged with distributing steroids to his independent contractors, but was ultimately acquitted mostly due to poor handling of the case by prosecutors than actual innocence. When not engaging in terrible behavior toward those who directly work for him, McMahon also takes time to treat those who indirectly work for him badly as well, as in the 2006 case of a Florida tanning salon employee who accused McMahon of sexual assault by showing her nude photos of himself before groping and trying to forcibly kiss her. No charges were filed due to what the police claimed was lack of evidence like witnesses or a video recording of the attack. Because every successfully prosecuted sexual assault case always features multiple eyewitness testimony and high-resolution video footage of the crime. Bonus fact: Kane is a Free Stater. Google the Free State Project for more information on those people. Mama Cass Elliot was best known for her work with the 1960s music group The Mamas and the Papas, responsible for such classic hits like California Dreamin' and Monday Monday. Here she is, along with some other contemporary female singers at the time, including her bandmate Michelle Phillips. Looking at this, the elephant in the room is Mama Cass was unfortunately as well known for her size as her singing, a fact which not only dogged her throughout her life, but her death as well, despite an autopsy proving she died of a heart attack and not having eaten anything beforehand. Rumors of choking to death on a ham sandwich persisted for decades.
Oh, there was Mama Cass and Karen Carpenter. Of course, if Mama Cass had shared her sandwich with Karen Carpenter, they'd both be alive today.
Pop music success didn't always depend on the attractiveness of the singer. In fact, for a strictly acoustic medium, one could argue that the singer's looks shouldn't matter as long as they sing well. Indeed, one of the earliest music sensations in the United States was the legendary Kate Smith, whose version of God Bless America invoked the same passion in her generation as the theme to Star Wars invokes in mine. But looking at her here, it's obvious that despite her raw talent, the only way her voice would ever hit the national music scene these days would be as the subject of a viral video where she wows the cynical judges of a TV talent show. Mama Cass gained her fame just as the music industry started to veer more and more towards putting attractive people front and center, while possibly ignoring better singers who weren't as photogenic. Indeed, by some accounts, she lost a few opportunities because of her weight, and it's commendable she gained the success and fame that she did. Outwardly, Mama Cass was brash and confident, but this masked deep insecurities, primarily about her size. She spent much of her final years crash dieting, once even losing over 100 pounds in a dangerously short amount of time, and it's likely these unhealthy choices invariably led to the heart attack that ended her life in 1974 at the young age of 32. This makes her guest appearance in the new Scooby-Doo movies a year before her death all the more tragic, considering how much of the episode was devoted to cracks about her weight. Jesus Christ, she owned a candy factory in the episode, because what else would be the dream job of a fat person, right? Imagine poor Mama Cass, her career having sunk to such a low that she was voicing a children's cartoon version of herself. Remember, this was long before Scooby-Doo became recognized as a cultural milestone, and television itself was considered beneath real performers, and cartoon appearances were the low end of that particular stick. Imagine Mama Cass going through all this in addition to having to constantly joke about how fat she was. Here's a supercut of all the times in the episode where her weight was the joke.
I was standing upstairs and suddenly, whoosh, I went right through the floor. I knew I was heavy, but not that heavy.
Okay, Cass, you can climb up now.
If I ever get out of here, it'll be strictly grapefruit. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, and in between snacks.
What happened?
What happened is too many Cass Elliot caramel bars.
Something tells me we have a queen-size problem.
You skinny little b****.
Here goes! Yikes! Something tells me this contraption wasn't designed for such a load.
Butterfingers.
Butter never spread like this.
You skinny little b****.
Thanks for coming to my rescue, kids. I could have starved down there in that basement.
We're all behind you.
So that's why it's so crowded back there. I think we've stumbled on something bigger than all of us. Well, bigger than you kids, anyway. Darn! Why couldn't we have landed in a mountain of grapefruit? Shaggy, are you all right?
I think so.
Heavy.
Look who's talking.
Both of you.
Hey, you should eat more. Food gives you energy.
I wish that were all it gave me. Why wasn't I born a skinny boy?
Cass, won't you join us?
My grapefruit diet, remember? I got a better idea. When I give the signal, we all split in different directions.
A 5-way stretch. What a great idea.
I got it from a girdle ad.
Won't you have a little something, Cass?
No, Velma, I must be strong. For me, it's grapefruit. Nothing but grapefruit. Far out! Here comes my grapefruit now.
Here's the dinner you ordered.
But those are covered with whipped cream, marshmallow, and chocolate syrup.
Not so loud. If you don't tell me, I won't tell my stomach.
She died a year later from a heart attack. And those were my picks for the worst Scooby-Doo guest appearances. Like most of these clickbait best of worst of videos, one or two choices are no doubt going to irritate or offend somebody. And that's fine, because everyone has their own views as to what makes a particular piece of entertainment good or bad. I did my best to explain why I made these choices, and if you disagree, feel free to make your arguments in the comments section, or make your own rebuttal video, but please, try not to punch down.